Welcome everybody to the Living Consciously television show, coming to you live from our Denver, Colorado internet studios. I don't know what that noise was, but apparently it belongs here. We're also streaming on YouTube Live and on Google Hangouts and on ConsciousEvolutionMedia.com. I'm your host and moderator, Coach Steve Tove, and our theme today is how trauma can cause imbalance in the brain and what we can do about it. Our guest today is a returning guest, multiple times returning guest, Lee Gervis, who is the CEO and also the founder of Brain State Technologies, and is joining us from that beautiful place called Arizona. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
And let me introduce you to our cast as well. And who we have on the cast today, next to the left of Lee, we have Jamie Lerner, who is joining us from that place where the wind never stops. That would be Chicago. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's good to have you. And then to the right of Lee, we have Linda Dyer, who is joining us from a place where the kangaroos are running wild. That would be Australia. Welcome to the show.
I keep looking for them, but I don't see them, Steve.
I know they're there somewhere.
It's
All right.
a pleasure to be here.
Welcome. And then next to Linda, we have Nina Di Rosa, who is joining us from a place where the lights never go out. That would be Las Vegas.
No, they never go out, but I think, Linda, we have a few kangaroos here. At least they're acting like kangaroos. They're jumping around here with their lights on. Anyway,
Okay.
good to be here.
Awesome to have you. So, Lee, thank you for being back on the show and on our network. And I think what we're doing is we're looking for an update on what's happening with brain, balancing our brain, and maybe the viewers probably deserve an explanation also. What do we mean by trauma, and what do we mean by brain balancing? Because maybe people are just tuning in for the first time.
Okay. First, the easy part is to talk about trauma. Prehistoric person, Dinosaurus rex and prehistoric person. Prehistoric person sees Dinosaurus rex and decides, I'm not going to fight, therefore I'm going to run. They become very sympathetic dominant at that point. Their brain switches to push blood to their extremities so that they can, in fact, run. Now, scenario 2, prehistoric person and Dinosaurus rex. Prehistoric person gets surprised by Dinosaurus rex, and this time cannot run away or hide. And so what they do is fall to the ground and cover up their head, getting to a fetal position, hoping that maybe Dinosaurus rex will be satisfied with a prehistoric person wing. That is, just take one of their, exterior parts and not take all of them. That is called a freeze response, and that brain shifts into a parasympathetic position whereby blood is actually pulled back from the extremities so that the person won't bleed to death. Those two actions in their extreme make up what we call the autonomic nervous system, and they are driven by the perception of the brain. Mind you, I said perception because it doesn't necessarily need to be real. What we have done at Brain State Technologies is we've found that corresponding bihemispheric lobes and views of those lobes from the surface with sensors can tell us if that brain is stuck in a parasympathetic, a freeze response, or more of a sympathetic, a fight or flight response. Those are major actions to trauma. There are many, many of them, not an infinite number, but a large number, and different brain functions are involved. However, these are the two major ones. And we've just written a paper with Wake Forest University School of Medicine where we documented with over 200, where they've documented with over 200 subjects and measurement of the autonomic system, that this is in fact and indeed a correct assumption that we have made and intervened on in the last 14 years. So what we do when we intervene, when we see that the brain is stuck in one side or the other, and one of the ways that, for example, we see, we call this condition publicly at least, is post-traumatic stress, when the brain gets stuck on one side or the other side. So what we do is we look at that pattern and we reflect, instead of the very high frequency or the very low frequency where the brain's stuck, we reflect back to the brain a middle frequency. We take a middle ground, right, instead of the high or the low. And we reflect that back to the brain by looking at it in real time and reflecting it back with sound, translating the dominant brain frequency in the middle to a note, and then play the note back to the person. So that when the brain sees that and does move to the middle, it does something that a meditator will do, and that is it relaxes itself. And in relaxing itself, it has the opportunity to reset. So all we do is really enable the wound to heal. Mind you, if you have a cut on your finger, right, the bandage doesn't heal it, the antibacterial salve doesn't heal it. What heals it is your own body. And so we believe that our own bodies will in fact and indeed heal us in many, many ways if we can reach that state of being relaxed and function from that point forward.
Fantastic. So what I was also hearing there is that maybe we have a way to reset human beings just like we do computers. There's a reset button.
That's exactly
yes.
right.
Sorry, I had to throw that one in there.
I welcome that with open arms.
I mean, I'm a geek. I'm sure that they're not going to agree with this analogy, but I certainly see it that way. In fact, the two hemispheres of the brain work like parallel processing computer systems. They're both doing the same thing at the same time.
Yeah, great. So I wanted to run something by you. I did actually 5 shows this last weekend with a doctor. His name is Dr. Marco Ruggiero. He is from Italy, and he's not just a doctor, he's a PhD and a researcher. And he was informing us, which I found quite fascinating, and maybe you will too, that we actually have 3 brains. That in addition to the brain that you were just speaking about, Lee, about 10 years ago, we found that our stomach is our second brain. And by the way, our stomach constantly communicates with this brain. And the third brain is called the microbiome, which are all the microorganisms that are living on our skin and within our bodies, which accounts for much more than the human being itself. Matter of fact, in weight, it weighs about 4 kilograms, which is quite a bit altogether. And so the human being that we think we are is only 1% of what we're perceiving. So we are not the center of the universe. We are not even in the center of our own universe.
Okay. What are we then? Robots.
Well, considering the microbiomes, I find it to be very fascinating. And when those guys are not happy, our humanity, our human beingness is not happy either. So what do you think, Lee?
It's your theory. It's not mine.
It's not my theory.
I don't buy it at all.
You're just the messenger, Steve. Steve is just the messenger of what he heard.
Why is it then that, in fact, if somebody has some compromised digestive issue, why is it, in fact, that at least 80% of the time we see that in a brain pattern? And when that brain pattern changes, that digestive issue is no longer compromised. Why is that?
But I think that supports that they're connected, though. I mean, that supports that, you know, it is mind-body continually. And so however you would balance the brain, you're balancing the entire body.
Absolutely.
You know, that makes perfect sense.
Well, yes, it does, but I wouldn't call the stomach a brain.
No.
Well, I don't know about that. I have another question. I really would like to know, since how do you think that this brain technology is trickling into the mainstream?
The Department of Defense has provided a research grant to work with active military, and that begins actually later this week.
For post-traumatic stress disorder or for brain injury?
For both. Particularly with people with post-traumatic stress disorder, but also with mild traumatic brain injury. We have worked and completed a pilot clinical trial with people who have traumatic brain injury post-concussion symptom, and after they've been concussed about 4 weeks, it's very difficult to come out of those symptoms, and at 6 months it's tremendously difficult. Very small percentage of people totally rid themselves of those symptoms in their lifetime. And what Wake Forest did was take 12 athletes who had been concussed for 3 months to 3 years and worked with them with our brainwave technology, and they all came out. And all of them went back to school, and all of them went back to their chosen sport, but 1 or 2. And somebody told me that chosen sport was football, and I said, well, maybe they were smart. But I didn't. That was a joke.
So, do you think they're going to make this public? Do you think that they're comfortable enough embracing brain state technology is a potential therapy, or and making this information public, or do you think this will still stay very much under the radar?
It takes a long time for us to grasp new ideas unless we're very conscious. A relatively small percentage of the population is extremely conscious, I'm afraid. And so it will take some time. However, we need to understand that the outside-in approach to well-being just doesn't work. It doesn't work.
No, of course it doesn't work.
Inside out. Why is it, Dr. Lee, that there is that we just don't use our brain? I mean, and as Jamie was saying, is this going to come more and more out there? I believe it is.
Something about myself here.
Why do we have this blockage of the most important part of our actual body? Because without our brain, we don't function kind of anywhere.
Life is hard.
Well, we all say that, and we all know that. But why is this such a hard problem for all of us to conceive? We can't seem to get past this barrier that we've all put up, that our brain is there and can function very well, and we can enhance it, and we just have this blockage. Where do we go, and how do we help even our audience out there to try to sort of start using it or start doing something to get ourselves going on it?
Or maybe it comes back to what Lee was saying, that if you experience as a child, and we're talking about trauma as in army or forces, but what about, I think it's very interesting what you said about perception, that you can have a really young child, and we know for the first 5 to 7 years of our life, we take in everybody else's stuff. We don't have the ability to use our brain to question it, if you know what I mean. So we're taking on everyone's stuff, and it's actually a perception of whether our life was traumatic or not. So everyone can have a similar experience at the age of 1 or 2 or 3, and some people will think it's horrendous, and other people say, oh, it's not too bad, and brush themselves off and move on. So I'm wondering how many of, what you're doing, Dr. Lee, is about that perception of somebody thinking that they've had this amazing trauma as a child, and that being cleared as they get older or living through it. Like, I'm an NLP trainer and coach, and I go back into people's lives, and quite often the decisions that we made as a small child from 2 to 3 were so profound for people. And when they go back and they go, oh my gosh, I made that decision, like to hate the dark or to hate that person or to feel afraid or to run because I was scared of whatever's happening. I made that decision then. And I've been living with it all my life. And like you're saying, you can trick the brain to go in and help clear that. And yes, so can we in a certain way. So I'm fascinated in hearing what you have to say. But I think a lot of it has to do with the perception of what that trauma was for us, and I don't know that it's always external. I think the trauma can be an internal feeling that we took on. Let's say we're born a kinesthetic. It could be a feeling that we take on about somebody's behaviour as an adult that has frightened us.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second, Linda? Because the fascinating thing about brain state technologies is that you don't have to know what the trauma was. You don't have to know anything about where you got stuck. It doesn't even matter. And in some ways, that speeds up the whole process.
Absolutely.
It's non-invasive. I can only speak to this because I've been through the whole training. I mean, I've had this done, and it was unbelievable, the effect after 5 days of brain training and the impact it had on my life, but it never mattered where the trauma came from or what it was about. And that's kind of the beauty of this technology. And I'm also wondering if insurance companies paid for this, would people be more interested in that as an alternative therapy?
There's a number of questions on the table, but first of all, thank you so much for that response. I couldn't have said it better myself, because we are Switzerland. We really don't make a determination at all in terms of sides. In other words, a trauma. I only care about the well-being of the person from this point forward, and though I do, of course, compassionately care as a human being about everyone, I don't let that at all influence me in working with a client, because I'm only looking at their brain pattern. I believe if we can facilitate anyone to deeply relax so that their brain resets itself, that they have the opportunity from that point forward to move in a optimum kind of way. Now understand, please, I know we are not created equal. And all of our histories and all of our capabilities are not equal. But that said, I will be a very satisfied human being if I, in fact, am able to manifest much of my potential, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And that's all I want to see happen. And that's and I believe it can happen when the brain is functioning in a reasonably balanced state, left to right, in low versus high energy in each area, and front to back. So those are the 3 dimensions we look at when we look at a balanced state.
So what is our DNA and our predisposition, maybe our history, our parents, grandparents? What is that has to do with how our brain operates?
A lot. You know that science has proven that we can be compromised individuals if our father had was an extremely and had extreme inebriation within a matter of weeks prior to conception. You know that that alone could compromise some of the fertilization process, which in turn could compromise the fetus. So would that DNA stick with that individual? Absolutely. But it's only a vulnerability. It's not the name of the tune. It's not the determinative of the individual. There are much bigger and more powerful things aboard than that. And you all even know that better than most people on the planet, frankly, because you know how important consciousness is.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's come on, that's for you and for me and for everyone. That's where it's at.
But that's why we
But, you know, it really comes down to personal responsibility, though. And people are, frankly, very disinterested in personal responsibility. I have to say.
So
the other thing is, that is so fascinating about this technology is that all you have to do is show up. You have to show up and sit in a chair. You don't even have to believe that it works. You don't have to do anything except physically show up and sit down in a chair and relax every day for 5 days. And you don't even have to buy into it, and it works.
That may be, Jamie, but please tell me, please somebody tell me, you know, on this panel, then why is it that people are more interested in watching stupidity, sex, and sports on television for hours and hours and hours every day than to do what we're doing right here?
Because they can sit in a chair and they don't have to move, they don't have to do anything, they just have to fiddle with their fingers and touch any key.
Well, you don't know. Well, we have to know. We have to know.
Don't you think environment, though? I mean, when you talk about DNA, you talk about an expression of possibility, too. An environment can enable or compromise a certain expression. So why doesn't what doesn't our environment compromise our behavior pattern as well? I think it does.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. Absolutely, it does. Yeah.
I mean, you've heard many people, and can I put a real short commercial in here? It's not for.
This is your platform. Go do what you want, Dr. Lee. This is for you.
Depends on the commercial. We may send you an invoice.
I'm just Lee. I'm a geek. You can call me Geek Lee, but that's fine. But you know, I read the book called Unbroken by Laura. Is it Hillenbrand? I think.
Yes, it is.
Last name.
Yeah.
And it's about a man. The man died on July the 2nd. His name was Louis Zamperini, and he was a Olympic runner. He was also a World War II vet who was in tremendous. He was imprisoned by the Japanese, but he was beaten and tortured for 2 years straight. But he not only came out of that, but he came out of it, as you might imagine, with unbelievable post-traumatic stress. Mm-hmm. He had, you know, all the symptoms and the huge nightmares, and couldn't sleep, insomnia, tremendous insomniac, and so he started to self-medicate, alcohol, and the story runs quickly here, but in doing that, he went to a revival, a Billy Graham revival, basically because his wife said that here's a ticket to the revival and here's a ticket to get out of town. You're going to take one or the other. And when he went the second night or something, you know, he did have that bam, that clearing. He was effectively taken to nothing at that point. He was relatively hopeless, and from there moved forward to never A, have another nightmare, B, stop drinking, and C, was totally forgiving of his captors, and especially of some of them that were targeting him because he was an Olympic runner before. He is my hero. If I could only be in this world just an inch of what that 10-foot giant was in my imagination, I would make a huge difference. Because, you know, the fact is, none of us know how courageous we are until we have to be.
Well, do you think that's because of his wife giving him that ticket? And I think you said either get out or go to this. That kind of jarred his brain and jarred his mind, and he suddenly realized that he's got to do something. So do you think he went to Billy Graham as more of an open mind, and he sort of opened it up and said, well, you know, I'm coming right kind of to the end of what's going on in my life, and he suddenly had this reaction where somebody comes in and gives you a bam, and you suddenly realize that, wait a second, I've got to do something. Do you think that's what happened to him, and that's why his brain was so open to absorb everything that was being said by Graham?
I think he was taken to the point where he didn't have other options but to take in something new.
Yeah, he had nothing left. He was at the bottom. And they do say sometimes you have to go right to the bottom to get to the stop and start again, but I don't know.
But even then, even many people get to the bottom and they don't come out.
No.
You know, but he did. But he was a very unique person. I would have never been able. I don't
say
want to
never.
know.
You never know. Don't say never. You came out of a lot too. So
I never know, but I don't want to know.
Well, wait a second, Lee. You came out of a lot, so your tenacity was pretty high, and you opened your brain up.
I did.
So
I did. Truly, I did.
You did go
And
through it.
by the grace of God, as far as I'm concerned.
But I don't think we have to wait. I don't think we have to wait for something horrible. I think we just have to decide that we want our lives to be meaningful and full and joyful and blissful. And if we're stuck in a moment and we've been in therapy and nothing's working, this is a really incredible option. And I think that's the message in terms of the mainstream. This is quick, it's non-invasive, and I mean, it's so effective.
Absolutely.
It's just like, it's kind of in many ways, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, that's funny. No pun intended, right?
No pun intended. Yeah.
But it's funny how people are reluctant. You know, people get so reluctant for change, and we're always saying we've got to change. But people get so comfortable where they are that their brain and everything around them is so comfortable that they don't want to disturb it because they become afraid. And you know, how do we break that, Lee?
Many of our clients aren't people that have a choice. I would say most of our clients don't have a choice. They've run out of options.
So they come to you for the last resource.
They've gone through lots of different kinds of modalities.
Why does yours work? Well, I know why, but let's our audience know why. Why does yours work? And you say they come to you as the last resort, and all the others haven't worked. What is that you do that is so different? I mean, I can see what you do, but other people might not. What is it that they decide that you are the person and they change with you?
First of all, we have a really strong belief system and orientation to the person heals themselves. We don't do that.
Choice is a problem.
Yeah, choice is.
But it's not more than showing up, is it? Because I have sent people who don't believe in this to do this brain training, and they have come out of it completely changed without believing in it at all. All they have done is shown up for 5 days in a row and sat in that chair and had the brain training done.
But Jamie, it's that 5 days showing up, and a lot of people can't show up for 5 days.
Well, no, I'm asking you, Lee, do you think that someone has to buy into it?
People can't show up for a show.
Wait a minute.
It's a guess.
Do you think that
I don't think
their belief system?
I don't think so. I think we have teenagers that come in so incredibly skeptical and
Exactly.
also sometimes really disrespectful that it's kind of hard to believe that technical staff can even work with them, and to see them walk out and to not only to witness but to experience
Must be amazing.
their incredible love for us. It is beyond.
And for themselves.
That to me
Yes.
is amazing. I dealt with teenagers for 16 years, and I know what you're talking about, Lee. And believe me, some of these teenagers are way, way out and way down. And when you tell me stories like that, you know, you give them that light, you give them that little, you open up that tunnel and they see that light. And they're so young, they want to walk through it, and they see the excitement, and it's the most amazing feeling.
It scales from their eyes. You know, it is amazing that one of the biggest thing in our solar system, being the sun, can be blotted out by a quarter if we hold it close to our eye.
Yeah.
We have to have some way of seeing beyond.
Yeah.
And we hold that quarter close to our eye when our brain is stuck. Not because we want to, but because that's where it is.
We're looking for it. We're looking for that light. We're looking for that open, that somewhere.
We all want it.
Yeah.
You know, when we went to the medium security prison in Nevada to work with inmates there, you know what their number one hesitancy to do that research with us was? They didn't believe, the director of corrections for the state of Nevada and the warden of that institution didn't believe initially that those inmates would be willing to participate in brainwave optimization because they had to give up their free time during the day. They weren't going to get anything for it.
Yeah, well, they weren't going anywhere.
No, but they had free time, so they could get out of their, cell, and their cells were small, and be out in the yard. They could exercise, and they did stuff like that, and they had to give that up. And so he didn't think that it would work. So we needed 12 men, and he took 70, the top quote unquote 70 bad boys, and he put them into two groups, and he was going to show them the video and explain what we were going to do to 35 of them night 1 and to 35 of them night 2. Oh. And from that, he hoped he could get about, roughly 15%, or about 12. He got 35 on night 1 and 35 on night 2 who signed up.
Wow, that's amazing.
Why? Because they knew they couldn't see the sun.
And there was an opening there. There was an opportunity there for them.
We all know. We know when we're not doing our best, but we just don't have a way to get out around it. We don't have a way to, remove that spot or that scale from our eye. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't happen outside in. It happens inside out.
Well, everything is from within you.
And I find that a very interesting story because I also worked in the prisons, and it's fascinating that the minute you put a course in there, like I changed the whole curriculum of the course, don't tell anybody, and the prisoners, I started teaching them how to look after themselves, like how important it was for their muscles and their, they were a bit upset about the different names that they had to give things, like, the gastrocnemius and so, but other than that, they learnt about how their body functions and this. And I had so many people sign up for the course that I had to have a guard standing there because they all wanted to know how do they operate more effectively and how can they make some different choices. And even though we started with 20 to 30 people, 2 of the guys actually came out of prison and didn't go back in. And for prisoners, that was a huge success because I kept saying, you can take this program and you can take it wherever you want when you leave here. So the language was about what you can do when you get out of here and you're no longer making those choices that other people are giving you to come back in. Because a lot of what was happening in the prisons was that the recidivism rate was because they joined up with others who were doing it. And I found it fascinating that I could talk to them about how well they functioned, and they would make the choice to change. And they were fascinated. The whole prison changed because of this program. They had less fighting up in the cells. They really wanted to learn about them. But if I found out that they'd been fighting, they were dismissed from the course. And I gave them an A when I started the program, and they had to keep the A. That's all they had to do was keep it by their behaviour and being tested every second week. Fascinating.
Dr. Lee, do you think the reason that they cooperated with Linda is because of her attitude and how she was, and how their brain started creating in their head that they believed her, in her tone of voice, in her appearance, in everything? Do you think that was something to do with why they kind of trusted Linda to change them?
Well, it probably did. And I'm not, I hate to sound so ignorant, but the fact is I'm relatively ignorant of that whole
arena,
sort of milieu. And I don't know what motivates them or doesn't motivate them, but I do know this, that none of them could answer any questions on a paragraph of a 6th grade reader, though they could read the words. They couldn't answer any questions about it when we started. They could read the words. Jane lived in a house. Jane had a puppy. Jane played in the backyard with the puppy. Jane threw the ball. The puppy got the ball and brought it back to Jane. Question, where did Jane live? Did she live in,
their house?
Vegas? Did she live in an apartment? They couldn't answer the questions. Literally questions like that. What did Jane have? Did she have a doll? Well, they just read it, and they read it to us, but they couldn't comprehend it. It didn't stick. Now, it didn't stick not because they didn't want it to stick. It stuck because their brain was highly asymmetrical. 2.5 times plus on the average, and some of them were as much as 15 times, 1,500% difference between left and right. Now, I couldn't function that way, you couldn't function that way, and they couldn't function that way. And so if they were really strongly asymmetrical, how do you think they got it back to be symmetrical? The best thing they could possibly do was rage. And that's what they did, and that's what got them there. They didn't go there because they wanted to. They didn't go there because they made a choice to be a criminal. They went there because they were trying to self-medicate themselves using the wrong thing from the wrong place at the wrong time in the wrong way. And they didn't know better. I really believe that.
And when they were done?
By the way, 4.5, 5 years later now, all of them have A, graduated from high school, all of them have B, graduated from junior college, and 2 of the 12 have graduated from college.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
This that we carry in each and every person in the world is highly capable of more than we can even imagine.
Oh, I agree. Absolutely agree.
Functioning.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about something. I've been kind of listening here for the last several minutes. So on one end of the spectrum, what I'm hearing is people are doing brain balancing, your program, that have basically run out of options and have no other choice. On the other end of the spectrum, people are doing it. These are people that are conscious, awake, and understand and can actually be with the energy of what this is. Now I'm wondering if there's a way to go towards the middle where maybe we can have a dialogue or talk about or have an understanding of how the frontal lobe works. Because I believe that our frontal lobe is the access to consciousness. Would you like to start the dialogue, Lee?
You've got him thinking. He's using his brain.
There are a number of corresponding lobes in the brain. They each form a part of a whole. If you take one of those parts of the whole out of balance, the remainders cannot work very well. And usually in time especially become very compromised too. So I don't know, especially not the frontals, but not anywhere, has what I would call, consciousness a capability at all. I think it requires all the corresponding lobes to function pretty darn well. When we look at certain kinds of injuries, they could be very in very one area, one specific lobe or one area of the brain, and yet in time all the functional areas will start immediately actually start changing, and they have changed to a very compromised position, and they no longer work in unison. This left side and this right side, the back and the front, they're dance partners. And their dance is sometimes a jitterbug and it's sometimes a slow dance, but they're dance partners. And the better they dance together, the more beautiful they are.
I'd like to share an example of something different, which is similar. I go to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor adjusts me first on the table, and then he uses a gun that almost looks like a glue gun, but it has tapping. And there are many levels of the tapping, and he puts it behind my ear. And depending on what he's trying to accomplish, he does this, and it resets my brain. And then everything else kind of goes back to the way it's supposed to. And it's really interesting how the brain can be reset and how it's attached to our physical body and how we function. And it's pretty cool. So I really think that there's something to this idea of resetting the brain in terms of how we are physical and emotional.
I think we can't deny that the main function really of the brain is to keep us alive. And so it is exceedingly self-serving. And in that regard, it will do anything it can to serve itself in the best way that it can. And some of those things are very unhelpful, and some of those things are extremely helpful. So the more it's apt to function in an optimum way, the more likely the things that it does will be those things which give life rather than reduce it, I believe. And I don't think it's a matter of, I think it's a matter of physicality as well as psychology as well as spirituality and consciousness. I think all of those things overlap in that one universe called brain network.
What can people do? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Lee.
Do you think our brain wants to be in balance, though? I mean, ultimately, don't you think we're always seeking to get back to that place of balance?
Yes. Absolutely.
Whether we're overcompensating one way or the other, but that's ultimately just innately where we're always seeking to go?
I think that overcompensating can, it is the bottom line, is the need for, it is the reason for substance abuse. Can I speak for a minute about that?
Yeah.
Robin Williams?
Yes, you can, of course.
Here was a man that actually had ways of compensating for compromised patterns which were incredibly ingenious and helpful to the world, but still didn't help him, to get back to a place of being quote-unquote reset. And so he found ways to make that happen. And I believe one of those ways, at least, was some substance abuse. one of those ways was also a depression. And then when the third strike hit, which was a degenerative disease called Parkinson's, it was too much to bear, and that brain pattern had a place that was really unsettled and compromised that caused him to move towards self-harm. I understand that.
Because we have so many of our celebrities, and they just named a dozen off today about how young they are and how the substance has killed them. A lot of them, what they were just talking about, the substance that had killed these celebrities, and how the pattern actually was very much the same. And it's funny because when you're in the limelight world, it's wonderful. The lights are flashing, everybody's hurraying and this. But then when you go back home and you don't have all those lights and all the photographers and everything, this is where a lot of these visionary people get lost into this world of drugs and everything, because they don't have that limelight all around them all the time. Why do they get in that sort of way of a quiet time that they think that they have to be on all the time, so they take drugs because then they can hide it?
You know, my heroes when I was little were Roy Rogers and Rin Tin Tin, and then Superman. But guess what? A 3-year-old now is faced with the major traumas of the world every day, almost all day.
24 hours a day.
I never had that. Our technology has moved so much faster than our consciousness and our ability to keep our brains, actively and healthfully balanced.
Are you talking about television?
Well, all of media.
So
yeah, I mean that's what you're referring to, right?
Yeah, everything is available to us all the time.
And just the general status and being as a people around kids.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a factor as well.
But see, our brains get so much more input. With my setting in out back by my sand pile watching ants is a lot different than watching, the Gaza Strip explode.
Yeah, of course.
It's way different.
Oh, yes.
So, Lee, I'm really curious about something, and this came up for me earlier, and I don't want to forget it. So, what do you think is the connection, or is there a connection between certain people's ability to quiet their minds? Matter of fact, sometimes just at will, they can quiet their mind to basically no conversation. How is that connected to the balancing of the brain? Is there a connection?
I think it's flexibility. When I looked at two Buddhist masters, they could turn hemispherically. Actually, they could turn their brains off almost, and just be almost flatline, just barely. Energy was just barely even moving, or they could think about something and make it like a fire on the screen. These men, and they could do it one side or the other, they had that kind of power, brain power. And so I don't think that today we have the flexibility that they have, quote unquote, mastered. And I don't think we do, because we are too far from nature.
But you're talking about managing your thoughts. Is that what you're referring to?
But I'm also talking about the natural rhythm. Nature has a rhythm. There are seasons. There are tides. There are day and night. There are everything in nature. There's a rhythm. And it's incredibly important to us, I think, as human beings, to be in touch with that rhythm and to appreciate it. And
well, I'm also referring to how I sometimes refer to this: the mind is a great thing to waste, because if we give it the power, it will take us anywhere and everywhere all day long, 24/7. Where we're not in control.
That's what makes life exciting.
It still comes back to the rhythm, which is what Lee was talking about, because the rhythm can go really high and you can stay there, stay there, stay there. Yeah, I was there, I got lupus, so now I'm really low. So the highs and the lows are extreme, rather than the people that you see that are really balanced in the world. They've still got the law of rhythm. There's still this up and down, but they expect the high and they enjoy it while they're there, and then they expect the little lows, that opportunity to just be low-key, maybe write their book, maybe relax, have time with the family, and then up they come again and they go to another high. The expected highs and lows, whereas most people, they have their high and they can't accept the low. They don't want the low, and so we burn out. That's an adrenaline. You know, we keep using adrenaline to keep us up in that high. It's like we're proving ourselves.
Exactly.
And the lows are away. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? Then there's a word for that. It's called allostasis. It means basically normalcy achieved by movement, versus homeostasis means normalcy achieved by a static position. And when we look at medicine, for example, we're thinking about it in terms of achieving a blood pressure, right? Reading. But the fact is our blood pressures don't stay the same. And if they don't move, even if we're quote-unquote in that normal range, but they don't move when they really need to, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
So if there's, if they get stuck in too high, then we're really in trouble. And if they get stuck in too low, we're really in trouble. They have to be able to move. They have to, we call it the allostatic model. And that's what we want to see in a brain. We want to see a rhythm, left, right, left, right, left, like you're marching. We don't want to see one side or the other. And when we do, we think, uh-oh, that brain's not optimally performing. And it's that easy. It really is easy.
But it's changing, though, and people don't want change, and something very easy becomes very difficult, because when it's that easy, they don't want to do it. Well, why would I do it? It's easy. So, it's like tricking your brain. And
I guess they do it because they, and Steve, you said it. I mean, they come to us because they don't have choices, because they have headache for 2 years plus. They have a digestive problem that medicine doesn't help. They have, chronic fatigue. They have insomnia. They have post-traumatic stress and night sweats. They have behavioral issues. They have addiction issues. They come to us for all those, yes. But they also come to us because they want to be better students. They come to us because they want to be more conscious. Our biggest user in the world right now is a meditation retreat center.
Great.
Why? Because once you get that brain so it's functioning, then you can, in fact, help willfully direct it to stronger movement, both peaceful and active. Boy, is that fun.
Yeah.
It gives you power. So they come to us for power.
Understanding who you are and what you can do and what more you can do.
Exactly.
Like giving them that confidence. I think it's giving people a lot of confidence too. I think when you give people confidence and you give them the praise, and it's like I had an example yesterday. I have a tenant, and this tenant, they have lots of problems, and they had this big check to cash, and they were reluctant to ask me, and I said, well, what's the problem? They said, well, we need to have it cashed, but we don't have any ID to cash it. I said, I'll cash it for you. And they were so shocked that I would say that the light in their face and the light in their whole persona changed. And it was just, and I'm looking at them and thinking, this is such a simple thing for me to do, but such a dramatic thing for them. And then I just looked at their body language and their whole smile. And they got in my car and I drove to my bank and I said, can you cash this for me? Of course we can cash it, no problem. And they looked at me like, why wasn't I afraid that something would happen? Because I wasn't. I knew that it was going to be okay. And if it wasn't, I knew what I was going to do, but that was beside the point. That didn't even come into it. But it was quite amazing to see when you see somebody's body reaction and how their little faces lit up and said, you will do that for us? And I said, of course, but when you look at them and they feel that they couldn't do anything and it was a hopeless situation for you, and then like you come along and you help these people, it's the same thing. You help somebody and you see that beautiful change.
But really, you help them help themselves, Lee, and that's really the most powerful thing. People walk out of there knowing that they are helping themselves. I mean, that's the power right there.
Absolutely.
And that is the most powerful thing for me, too, though. I mean, it's incredible to be a blessing.
Yeah.
I'm incredibly blessed when we're blessings. I mean, just incredibly.
Yes, but you're also recognizing it, that you are having a blessing. People don't even recognize that. So you even have something else for yourself because you have that. And you acknowledge what you were given, and you also use what you were given to help other people. And that's a lot of people don't even do that.
And are you well? Are you good? Are you?
I'm cancer-free. I'm starting to work out.
Right.
I'm getting a little ornery.
That's good, right?
Yeah, that's my staff generally says
There's
that.
a kid in there. I recognize a kid in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, he's got that impish smile at the moment.
That's great.
You know, it's fun, and yet I'm a concerned citizen in the planet, and understand that. Wow, we surely have a lot of incredible chaos going on right around us. You know, I think in Missouri, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Middle East, all over, in Africa, in South America, and now in Mexico, along our border here. Wow. It's just a lot, right?
The whole world is disrupted.
Yes, but a balanced brain has a greater chance of taking it in and using that information productively than an unbalanced brain.
In
That's
fact,
for sure.
I don't think I could handle it personally without it.
Yeah.
It would overwhelm me, I'm afraid. Because the more conscious you are, the more you see and understand that. And more you understand the loss of potential in the world because of it. Wow, what a huge loss of potential
that we're having right now all over the world. Absolutely, everybody's.
I want to thank Lee from something you said in a previous show, because I've recently used that example with a client and had dramatic changes. When you were on the show once, you said that everyone. When you found out you had cancer, everyone sort of accepted you to accept that you may not be here. And then you said, hang on a minute, if we have all got that belief that I may not be here, why don't we all turn it around and have that same belief about me getting well? And then I can just get well. And that must have stuck in my mind, because as a coach, I was confronted by a lady that was supposedly dying from leukemia, and when I found out it had been for quite some time, I said, well, you're doing I won't use all the words I said because they're not very good for television, but I said, you're doing an effing awful job of dying, so why don't you focus on living? And she went, and it was such a shock. And I said, your son would be benefited, you'd benefit, and then whatever happens, and now she's running a photography business, and it's just going bigger than Ben-Hur. She's happy as a piggy mud. I saw her again yesterday, and her whole life changed around from what you said on that show about thinking about how we can live and what we can do to make our life great and show whatever that potential, whatever that purpose was we were put here. And yeah, it's just I saw her again. It's fabulous. I want to thank you.
Congratulations.
See, Lee, you're teaching without knowing you're teaching.
All right. Well, guess what, folks? The conscious hour is over. So I wanna thank Lee. Thank you very much for being on the network.
Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you, Lee. Amazing.
And I just want to underline that if anybody that's watching this show now or in the future, if it touched, moved, and inspired you, something that any one of us have said, especially Lee, go get your brain balance, because just maybe, you will continue your path on this planet doing what makes your heart think. And I can't think, personally, any other reason for me to be here than do what makes my heart sing.
Amen.
Amen. That's right.
Beautiful.
Thank you
you.
all.
Wonderful.
We'll see you next week, same place, same time, Living Consciously TV.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Steve.
Bye.
Everybody.
Fantastic
Bye-bye.
show.
Bye-bye.
Bye.